Welcome to the Earthworks podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
All right, here at the Earthworks podcast with a special guest. Very excited to have Jerad Minnick on. Jerad, how you doing?
Hey buddy, how you doing today? Hopefully good. Hopefully good.
Yeah, for sure. Jerad has his own company, the Natural Grass Advisory Group, and we're going to talk a lot about that. But we're just kind of going to get into this conversation, Jerad, with something that I like to ask everybody, and that is, this crazy business that we're in, the turf industry. Do you remember your first day on the job? First day you were getting paid to do this? Maybe it was cutting grass, maybe it was something else. I don't know. But can you tell me a story about your first day working?
Yeah, I think I remember it because it comes up in my therapy sessions. From what life has become. No, it's not completely true at all. It is therapy, thankfully.
That's right.
Man, that's a good question, Jack, because I started mowing yards when I was, I mean, young.
Yeah.
I grew up on a farm in Missouri, and it was one of those things to cut the front yard was a fun thing to do because you didn't have to go out and chop horse weeds or something like that in the soybean fields. So
you got to get on a tractor. You got to sit down, huh?
Exactly, but there wasn't any getting paid for that. So my first day getting paid was actually on our local golf course in the farm town I grew up in. I grew up outside of about 15 miles. I grew up about 15 miles from the nearest, town of 8,000 people.
Wow.
So
You really did grow up out in the farm country.
Farm country, baby. It's some of the most fertile soil in the United States.
And this is right off the Mississippi in Missouri, or what?
West of there to be on the other side of the state. So east of the Missouri, but north of the Missouri. So where the Missouri River goes across from Kansas City to Columbia to St. Louis. North of there, because the way I understand it is that when the glaciers came down, in the Ice Age, that the deposits they left that's why the farmland in northern Missouri and into Iowa and Nebraska is so rich, because it's some fantastic soil to grow some corn and soybeans on, that's for sure.
And that's what you guys were growing at your family farm, corn and soy?
Yep.
How many acres there?
I mean, back then it was, I think it was, somewhere around 1,000, but now I think they've definitely continued to expand. Agriculture is so different now than it was. I'm dating myself a bit and starting to sound like one of those old people that we like to make fun of, but as soybeans and corn were not worth much in the middle of the 80s. So
okay.
So it was definitely a different time then to what agriculture became in the 2000s, and obviously things have changed a bit now as well. They're kind of caught up in the middle of the trade, some of the trade disputes that have gone on with the previous administration, but it's going to get sorted out too, I think.
No doubt. Yeah, so, and that's the reality of where you grew up. That's very much the reality of where how big was your high school growing up? What'd you graduate?
I graduated in a class of about 150, but
Okay.
until my junior year, I was in a high school had a class of between 15 and 20.
Wow. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So first day getting paid was on a golf course. I didn't know you worked in golf. So your first job was in golf.
Yeah, we our little farm town. One of the most fantastic little public golf courses I think that still exists in Missouri today, especially northern Missouri. It's funny to think about, to learn about golf in that way and learn about turf grass, and especially after cutting lawns. It was very different.
Mm-hmm.
But we knew the NPK part, we knew the fertilizer part from agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't really that hard. ironically, and a flip side, we knew to give it, and we'll get into this, separately. We knew to give it what it needed, but don't give it any more, because then you're wasting money.
Mm-hmm.
That's an agriculture thing. That's not a turf grass thing. But
Right.
that piece of turf grass was pretty easy. If the soil's compact, well, you run a V ripper through it and you decompact it It's what we spend the entire winter doing. Running over these farm fields with a V ripper that you were pulling 2 or 3 feet deep to take the compaction out of the soil.
That's kind of what I was thinking as you were talking about, what's the difference? So I came off the farm, I got onto this really nice, probably well-used public golf course in northern.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And so, I get the fertility side, I get the soil side, but the big difference is people, is use, right?
Big difference.
And I think, I mean, talking about what you do, you and I've been working together for years, and we have a good relationship, and what you do is you really promote to the community that yeah, when turf fails, it's because of its overuse, and maybe because of not having a maintenance program that can handle the use. I mean, not to jump too far into this, but
Well,
like,
I'm gonna jump into it a little bit, just to put you back on course, if I may, because
okay,
uh, I think, and I'm convinced, and actually I know from our experience that we do every day, that term of overuse. Um, Natural grass fields are not overused. Natural grass fields are incorrectly maintained and or incorrectly built. They're not overused. We have dealt with very, very few situations anywhere in the world that maintenance has been completely right for us to actually say, oh, well, the maintenance is right, the construction was right, it must be too much use. Haven't seen it yet.
excellent,
Haven't seen
excellent.
it yet.
Well,
So
let me catch the listeners back up to this. I mean, so we left you as a 12-year-old with
yeah, exactly right.
you
That was
were
a
there
good
with a weed eater.
who had never been around people in my life. So,
but your career in the industry progressed from there. I know that you went to the University of Missouri, right?
yes, sir. Yeah.
And that's where you've got your turf degree from, your bachelor's in turf grass sciences. So and then from there, and you continued in the world of sports turf, I believe, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
It's Jack, it's one of those things that one of my favorite podcasts as a business owner and entrepreneur now is called How I Built This. I guess it's from
Yeah, it's
I guess
from
from
NPR.
NPR.
It's
Yeah,
an NPR podcast. Yeah.
and the host always asks the question every week to the entrepreneur he's interviewing: Do you feel like that where you're at is because of hard work or because of luck? And man, I tell you what, part of it's luck, or a lot of it's luck. I mean, I'll outwork anybody, just bring it. But I was working in golf. Dr. Irvin, who is now, I guess, at University of Delaware, is that
Yeah,
right?
that's right. He's in
Who
Delaware
had
now.
been in Iowa State, or yeah, had been in Iowa State,
Okay.
or no, actually hadn't been there yet. He was at Missouri and then went to Iowa State. Or maybe it was the other way around. I forgive me, Doc, for being incorrect on your timeline. But he he was young, and he was one of my advisors, and I was so lucky. I was so lucky to experience a really curious mind, and be impacted by a guy like that. But at the same time, I'm sitting in his office one day, and had an internship for a golf course lined up that summer, with at Country Club of Missouri, which is a private course in Columbia, where one of my former guys I went to school with, Ryan Sears, is a superintendent now.
Excellent.
I was going to do an internship, and I was on top of the world. And Trevor Vance, the head groundskeeper for the Kansas City Royals, gives him a call while I'm literally in the room, and it's hey, I'm looking for some interns. We've never had interns before. We're thinking about having some interns. And I dropped everything that I had. I was supposed to start my internship like the next day. something like that. It wasn't, I had a week or something to get there.
Yes.
And boy, I dropped everything. I was a lifelong Royals fan. I love sports. We touched on, I was mowing yards as a young person. My brothers, I have two younger brothers. I built my first baseball field at like 12.
Get
We
out.
were
You're a
mowing
Field of
stripes.
Dreams guy. You're a Field
Yeah.
of Yeah, get out.
Oh, we had it. Oh, we had the cornfield in the back and everything. Absolutely. We built our own fence. We had the grass tall for the foul lines, and we mowed
Careful, man.
stripes.
The babe might walk out of that
That's
field.
right. You never know.
A car
You
might come
never
out of
know.
that field.
Yep. Shoeless Joe. Yes, sir.
Oh, that was it. That was
But so that was a no. George Brett was my absolute just hero. I mean, of course I'm going to take that job. I'm going to take any opportunity. Didn't know what it was going to pay. Didn't care. I
right.
didn't care. So and I was so fortunate to be exposed to a life that I'd never known of living in the big city for 3 months.
Mhm.
To be exposed to professional sports, to be exposed to a big budget. The courses I had worked at previously, or we didn't have a lot when I was growing up. It was a whole nother world of of possibility, and just and it's been downhill ever since, for a few,
Well,
I guess you could say.
yeah, you're right. It is a real blessing because, like you said, you had two experiences both, and they led to each other. Your time with Dr. Irvin, that was like, this guy's just a curious mind. He's and it's cool to be around. And then
Yeah,
it leads into this whole big kind of metropolitan opportunity for you.
yeah, right. Yeah, as we call Kansas City very metropolitan, but it's for me, I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
And in fairness, Jack, for any of us or any farm kid today, I mean, it's one thing we lose sight of, that when we bring kids into the industry, that even in the internet world today, we gotta remember where we came from, because it's
We're ag people.
absolutely, absolutely, we are. Yeah, and that's a special thing. That's a
Yeah.
special thing.
You're right. Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
that's a good thing to keep in mind.
Yeah.
So okay, so now you're with the Royals as an intern, and it's funny. I brought this up with you earlier on a phone call that George Toma was getting so much play in the last couple
Yeah,
of days
it's
with
brilliant. Huh?
baseball,
Brilliant.
and
Yeah.
that's his neck of the woods, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. He had retired. Unfortunately, he had just retired, but so I didn't ever get to know him really well. But his youngest son Ryan is I would still consider a friend today. He's an airline pilot for Delta, and I think the world of him. That dude works. That dude works hard. He worked for us then. He had some of the worst jobs. He was
Mhm.
low man on the totem pole, even though his
Mhm.
dad had been in charge for forever.
Mhm.
he he never said no. I'm not going to do that. That's too low for me. I said, give me that job, and I'm going to do it. And it's great to see the attention that George continues to get. I know a lot of people laugh about it, but I think there's one important thing that people always kind of scoff at, that impacted me in a big way, is the and then some, the details.
Oh.
And when we start, when we start picking apart, or we start looking at data, we start talking about what fields are best and what fields are not, or second tier or third, every single time that a field is the best, it's because of the details. It's because of those small things that we as field managers can see, those
Mhm.
small things that we care about. Those
Mhm.
things make a big difference to athletes. Doesn't matter if they're 5 years old, or if they're professionals making 5 million a match. I mean, it's an important piece.
Wow.
So I love the legacy that he's known for a lot of things, but God, to me, there's nothing more powerful than that.
Yeah, that is very powerful. And yeah, and it's so much more than just the aesthetics. When you're talking about
Yes.
the details matter, you're not talking about the aesthetics. You're
No.
talking about the things that by themselves might be imperceivable, but all together, when you can truly back it up with with data,
Data.
it may
Yep.
you can then dial it in to make things work.
Yes. Yeah. It's
Repeatably work, right?
that's an exact, that's a wonderful point. Repeatedly, yes, to be able to have consistency. Yes,
Mhm.
and that's a big, it's a big piece of what we'll talk about here, is just the importance of data, and the importance of those small details that, frankly, before we had to guess on. Now we don't have to guess anymore, because we have data to back us up, and get us that extra edge that we need to be as good as we can possibly be.
Right, because here is one constant. We talk a lot on this show with golf course superintendents. We talk with lawn care operators. We talk with sports field operators, or sports field managers and consultants. Here's the consistency, the constant. Turf is a grind,
Yeah.
right? The turf game is a grind. Maybe not everyone knows. You think about the baseball season.
Yeah.
These guys are working these homestands for 10 or 14 days, and the game's not over until 11:30. Then the work after that doesn't finish until much later. The turf game's a grind for everybody, but even more importantly, and what your company really gets into, is that it's a grind for the fields too. If they're not built properly or maintained properly, they fail.
It's correct. Yeah. Yeah. And it's, one thing I would say there too, Jack, is on the grind, and I hear, I love listening to these podcasts. It's I've learned a lot about. Well, let's touch back. I started in golf. I don't
Mhm.
know a damn thing about golf. Excuse my cursing. This is a pod.
No, oh no, you're good.
We gotta keep it PG-13, right?
And that works.
But I mean, I respect the work that a golf superintendent does so very much, to be able, especially to keep grass alive at under an eighth of an inch. And
Mhm.
it's, but on the flip side, I know a lot of golf course superintendents that I frankly had to go to battle with from time to time, about, well, the field, this field has too much traffic. It's not gonna work. I had to have that situation for the well-known superintendent here in the DC area, a couple of years ago, of, well, this is so different. Like, they have to have synthetic turf in this situation. Well, I'm sorry, but I don't know your business, but at the same time, unless you've ever maintained a high traffic field like we do on a daily basis, it's still a little different. And I think we lose sight of. There seems to be a battle that goes between the two industries, and it's not two industries; it's the same industry.
That's exactly
And
right.
it's similar that a golf superintendent in one part of the country doesn't completely understand the challenges of someone in another part of the country, but you have to put yourself on their shoes. But same thing, even with the grind, as we talk about here, is it really a grind? And it's a grind from what we know.
Hmm.
And that's one thing that I know I've ruffled a few feathers, um, even politically and socially, over the last, especially the last year or 18 months. But perspective in my life, I'm so lucky, Jack, that I told you where I came from. I've got to, I've been in over 20 countries now, and I've worked on some of the most incredible, worked in some of the most incredible situations ever. I've stood on a field. I've stood in airports, and I've been in countries where I'm the only one that speaks English, and I might be the only one that speaks English for 2 or 3 days.
Hmm.
And I know what it's like to be the minority. I don't know what it's like to be really put down, because I'm typically the American. But I also know what it's like to be the American,
Sure.
which
To be
people in
the
other
person that's
countries look
different.
at us like, oh, great, an arrogant American. That's all we need.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know what they're saying in their language, but I know exactly what that look on their face means.
Tell
So
tell tell us a little bit more. So this is what you do. This is what you do for work. What are you doing while you're there, in one of these countries? And tell me more. Give me an
trying to help, trying to be a resource. We might be sent there by a soccer club that's doing a training camp there, say, and we've done a few situations like that in places like China and Singapore, and to go in and try to be a resource, because it doesn't matter if I'm standing on a field that's for 10-year-olds in, let's say I was at a school in Singapore, it was elementary school that a European club was considering training at. That field could have been a field in, down the street here in Washington, D.C., or could have been a field in Miami, Florida, or could have been a field in Seattle. Guess what? The middle was worn. The corners were fine. The irrigation system was outdated. Like they literally had one of the corners was being irrigated with a sprinkler that had been duct taped to the rollers of a rolling chair.
Oh my gosh.
Frankly, it's like creativity. They're finding a way to get the work done, which is back to even my point on the grind. Like, man, what a great job! What a great line of work to be in.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
And
You all do have to yes, always take a minute to smell the roses and say,
amen to that, brother.
this is
Amen
fun.
to that. So fun.
This is fun, man.
I haven't worked a day in my life. How good is that? I haven't worked a day in my life. I mean, it's that, and it's not as cliche, but it's true. Like, we could have an office job. We could be, people that do those things, they love it too.
Right.
But,
right.
Most of us that are in this industry, or have been in agriculture or been athletes, that we've gotten into it because we love it. And it's, and that creativity, the human spirit that we see in the other countries, but we also see in the United States.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, to do what your business alone is so creative, because creativity comes in many forms. Maybe the creativity is peeling back another layer off the onion and trying to understand more, and then reacting to that. And I think that's what you do very well. So I mean, some more examples of what you do. Like you said, you come in to try and help, to be a resource.
Yeah, we're not. Sometimes we get, or I know there's typically especially in this industry, there's typically a stigmatism against consultants, at least on the sports field side. It's ironic to see the number of consultants and agronomic support people that do work with architects and golf construction, and we don't have that in sports. We don't have it. It's
Interesting.
It's a very territorial business, especially from a sales consultant standpoint.
Okay.
And obviously you have a terrific network of vendors and suppliers from an earthwork standpoint. But it's different. It's different for me to show up and say, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to change this and do that, and let's think about it this way. And none of it has to do with anything that's been done in the past. It's not an indictment of the past. It's about the possibilities of the future. How do we make this field better? How do we make all of our fields better and stop making the same mistakes that we've always been making that have led to limitations on fields?
At Earthworks, I'll interject. At Earthworks, we use a phrase about the soil test, and it fits so well into what you were just saying. The soil test is not a report card of what happened. Okay. It's a roadmap for moving forward.
Brilliant. Jack, that's brilliant. I hadn't heard that, but I'm probably going to borrow it if you don't mind. But you'll see me writing here. I'm going to take notes.
That's public use. Go ahead.
Well, it's funny because one of the biggest things that has ever impacted me in my life is, to see the impact that precision agriculture is having in agriculture. Now, I reference growing up that, you in agriculture, you don't do anything that you don't need to do unless you need to do it, because you don't spend money, or if you spend money, you don't make money. Like as a farmer, my dad, if he spends, he'd love to go out and fertilize 4 times this year because that's the way he's always done it. But is he going to make any money? Does he need to? What's the payback on that?
That's right.
It's when I got into turf and I'd be a part of a maintenance program that the fungicide is labeled for 21 to 28 days and we're respraying at day 14, well, either the fungicide doesn't work or something else is wrong because we're wasting money.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing that just, that really never, I was never okay with. And then, then when sports science started to impact and even statistics started to impact sports, that started to trickle down, and I started to pick up on some of those things that even one of my favorite references, Jack, is Moneyball.
Yes.
Everybody's seen Moneyball. They know the character that plays, Paul Di Podesta was, kind of being, his sense of who he was with Billy Bean was, kind of, question everything and use data and statistics to make these decisions, which, had come from Bill James and Moneyball from, when was that? The 50s or 60s even?
Something like that.
And the impact of that in combination with what we're talking about with precision ag.
Okay.
You need a data point to make a decision, even a soil test, you referenced it.
Yep.
If the soil test doesn't call for it, then why do we put it out?
Mm-hmm.
Well, because that's the way we've always done it. Well, one of my favorite quotes from Kevin Plank, the owner of Under Armour, is the only thing that can get you fired from Under Armour is to say, this is the way we've always done it. But what do we do in turf? We do it the way we've always done it.
Absolutely.
And in sports fields,
yes,
if the rule is that, okay, after 500 events, or your field can only host 500 hours of play or 250 events. Okay, so what? I mean, I can pick every major university and pick out a guide sheet that they have on the limitations of natural grass sports fields. And I won't name one because we're not going to open up that can of worms today.
Okay.
But it makes people anxious or nervous when I say that. But every day I'm told the rules, or we're told the rules about how much a field can take and the limitations of a grass field. Well,
and what it led to, and you already broached it, is that they shut down grass fields and they put in plastic fields.
Yeah, what it has led to is 20,000 to 25,000 synthetic fields that have been installed at this point,
mm-hmm.
at $1 million a piece. That's $600,000 to replace the synthetic. And this is not, Jack, this is not in any way in our business. In no way is grass versus synthetic.
Mm-hmm.
It's we make grass better. How do we, all of us together, how do we make grass better to meet some demands? But the synthetic turf business is valued at over $3.5 billion in North America. They expect that to go up to $3.3 billion by 2027.
Wow.
What are we missing? Because we're obviously missing a lot. Is Earthworks turnover somewhere in the billions yet?
No, not quite there. Right.
Let's talk to Joel about that. Let's get this cranked up here. Come on. The amount of money that's being left on the table because we want to sit back and talk about how we do things or how we've always done things. It comes back to me, or the way we look at it, Jack, is called guy called Peter Drucker, who was a business consultant, called the naive question. If we hadn't always done it this way, is this the way we would start? Today,
is this what we would start doing?
If we started over and you and I just came into the industry and we said, you know what, this grass field thing seems pretty fun. Let's do this. How do we do it?
Right.
And if we started from scratch, and we have a puzzle as a business, like our education and our grass can take more system is built around the 5 pieces of a puzzle. Mowing.
Yep.
Pretty simplistic, but very important.
Very important.
Cultivation or aerification. We call it, aggressive aerification. Reduce impactful aerification.
Okay. Yeah.
Make the soil soft.
Yeah, that's right.
If the soil's hard, we have to make it soft. If it's not hard, maybe we don't need to Maybe we
Right.
can
Or
maybe
at least it's not as hard much of a
exactly right.
focus.
Talking about superior grass selection. Are we using the best grasses that we can possibly use? So now we've talked about the best grass we can possibly use. We're talking about cultivation to make sure the soil is soft so the roots can grow, so the water can soak in. And we're talking about mowing that grass because it's growing. Well, guess what we haven't talked about yet? We haven't talked about plant feeding yet.
No
Because guess
fertility.
what? If we don't have those other three things right, our plant feeding's not going to matter.
That's right. That's
But what
exactly
do we
right.
talk about first? Typically, and obviously, from a fertilizer standpoint, let's talk about plant feeding first. But it's not the most important. We got to get these pieces of the puzzle. Then, okay, then we're going to talk about plant nutrition, plant feeding. Guess what? We're going to make those decisions based off soil test.
That's right. That's right. And but keeping in mind that if the porosity in the soil and the moisture isn't right, then
that's right. It's not gonna help.
Yeah.
I said that I say this in seminars a lot, and and I ask people to raise their hands to say, hey, do you spend money on fertilizer, but you aerify one, or deep tine or something one to two times a year? Most Parks and Rec situations. I mean,
They'll
that's
wait
what
until after Thanksgiving, and they'll do the as minimum as possible and then shut it down.
So my suggestion, well, stop spending money on fertilizer and spend it on aerifier tines. I promise you, your fields will get better immediately because you'll have soil porosity, you'll have deep roots, you'll break down the organic matter that exists already, and all of a sudden you're going to have then you can feed it. Same thing, the fifth piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, what's the fifth piece here? Irrigation.
Irrigation. Well, how many? I always love it that early in my career I was taught what I call the thumb test. And you take your finger and you put it to the soil to see. I think I need to run. Feels a little dry. I think I'll run 15 minutes tonight. Well, how do I know what in the world is in that soil? Like, how arrogant did I think I was to think that I'm so smart that I can put my finger on the soil and figure out how much water it needs? It's called a soil moisture probe. But the utilization of a soil moisture probe, 25%, 30% at least in the sports field industry, pretty limited.
And let's dial back a little bit to talk about what are we really talking about as the sports field industry. Are we talking about the NFL football stadiums and a couple major league fields? Or no, I don't think so.
Well, there's 100 from stadiums to parks and schools. There are about 130,000 fields just in the United States of America.
My goodness, 130,000 fields.
But you think about, if we're already to 20 to 25,000 are plastic. I mean, as I think about that, it's like, well, maybe we're not even. We've probably missed several because most parks jurisdictions don't even realize the number of fields they do have.
Yeah, a complex.
You're talking 600, 700 fields in some parks municipalities potentially. Okay. So it's a lot of fields, Jack.
Yeah, and that's kind of the point I was really making. Like, we can't please nobody consider that what we're talking about is the 30 NFL stadiums in the country. We're talking about sports fields as a community service. Everybody plays sports. Everybody gets out on these parks, and it touches everybody. We've spent a lot of time this year talking about how golf has reached out to touch more people.
So good too. It's so good to see. So exciting.
It's wonderful. But I mean, sports already does that. And I mean, we have a real PR story to tell here. Like,
absolutely. So, yeah. And you tie in the things we were working on previous to pandemic were essentially working on funding ideas to help with parks and recreation and such. The carbon market's going to be, I think is going to be a big deal for turfgrass because, and as I say that, people that know what it is are probably cringing because they're like, oh, here we go, he's going to go hug a tree. And, but when we start talking about carbon sequestration and carbon offsets, guess what grass does every day? It sequesters carbon.
Every day, carbon
all day long. If the ground's not frozen, it's sequestering carbon. And even if it is frozen at the top, it's still probably sequestering some down below.
And we don't plow it up either.
That's exactly right. We don't turn
going.
it over and let it all go back into the soil again.
Right.
Go into the air again.
Right.
We deposit it.
And it stays. We're building topsoil.
Yes, sir. And it gets better and better. And that's tens. Well, let's go to fields. Let's say there's 130,000 fields. That's potentially 260,000 acres. Well, we know there's a lot more than that when it comes to natural grass. I mean, we did a study when I was in college of the number 3 crop, even number 3 or number 4, I apologize. Even in the state of Missouri,
which was a farm
agriculture state,
right,
is turf grass.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially with pastures and lawns, and we lawns get such a bad name for all of this, blah blah blah. Well, you know what? That's because there's too many people worried about the things they shouldn't be worried about, because turf grass is a solution. We call it a climate mitigation tool.
That's right.
And we have to stop being scared of change and what I'm going to say this quietly, the Green New Deal, which people don't understand as a framework. It's not it's a cluster of ideas.
That's right.
There's a reason the American Landscape Society, the ASLA, or the Landscape Architects Association, they're one of the biggest proponents of climate mitigation and green infrastructure spending. It's gonna benefit us all, because grass is good, baby. Grass is good.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, Elon Musk put up $100 million to someone to figure out carbon sequestration, to figure out carbon.
We've already figured it out. Did you put in your application? Come on now.
That's right. That's what I said to everyone over here.
Jack, we're talking about all this, and you bring up he's a fascinating guy. They shoot a rocket to go to the space station, and the booster rockets land back on the ground where they started.
It's amazing.
Like we put a man on the moon.
That's right.
Put a computer in our pocket. Elon Musk we can make rockets come back to where they stopped or started. Why can't we figure out this simple little grass thing?
Well, let's get into it, Jared. I mean, let's get into it.
When you have the answer to that, I want you and Joel, and you can have your own podcast and ponder that, okay?
Well, let's do a little case study about what occupied last summer for you.
Sure. I'd love to talk about
it. Because that is, I think, an excellent example of how can we figure out this grass thing so that we can build and maintain fields that can take more, that can take all of this use.
Correct.
I mean, that was like the biggest difference in what you see from your agriculture background, just growing up on a farm, then to move to a crop that by nature has people using it, walking on it, ripping it, tearing it apart, compacting the soil, all that stuff. So this past summer, you were the MLS pitch advisor for the MLS's Back tournament, right? You can explain to everybody what happened there. That was in June and July of last year.
July and August. Yeah, we're coming up on we're going to be right around the 6-month anniversary of the championship coming up here pretty soon. Yeah. So, my in my role with the league office of in support of fields for Major League Soccer, the situation came up because early March, sports stopped, and I mean, you think about what 2020 was, and I think that's one thing too of especially people, and you mentioned the resurgence of golf. I think one thing that I find a lot of people don't realize is that if every professional level and or collegiate level sports field manager that I know on a personal basis took a 15 to 20% pay reduction for this year, because
Oh,
sports didn't exist. I think there's been a lot of that people don't understand, that especially even vendors, that between Major League Baseball, the NFL, and MLS especially, I mean, there's between a 9 and $11 billion hit when it comes to revenues. I mean, it's a
wow.
significant, and even when we talk about, hey, the economy's great, the economy sucks
Right.
when it comes to tourism and sports. Might be great in golf, but it's not great for private clubs who
No,
continue to lose food and beverage, and
no,
whose
no.
rounds are up because their members are playing, but their revenue's down because they don't have outside members playing.
Yeah, you're right. It shouldn't be a secret, and it shouldn't be glossed over either. In
Yeah,
the turf
that's
in the turf business, it
it's
was
tough.
a good year for golf, and it was a good year for lawn care. It was an awful year
It was
for
a
our
nightmare,
brothers in sports and
absolute
schools.
nightmare, and
Yeah,
it continues. I mean, it continues. I mean, there are a lot of professional sports teams that have laid off. Their sports field manager at the top probably survived, but I know several organizations had to lay off their number two that had been there. A few of them that had been there for multiple years, and these are big names. If people
mhm,
understood, like the impact of this is going to be long term when it
mhm.
comes to the professional and collegiate level. Now, on the flip side, the hope is that what is brewing and improving at the
Municipal.
lower levels,
Yeah,
it's going to
municipal recreation.
continue to grow. So now I say that because I think it's important to hit on that for so many people. These guys these people with these professional level jobs. It's sexy to be working for these big teams. Well, man, it's not. This year
No.
was a grind. This year
Yeah,
was a grind because
yeah. It wasn't as much fun
yeah, and
when it
that's
got
everybody. That's
laid off.
everybody in every single position, from marketing to ticketing to everyone in sports took pay cuts.
Yeah.
We cut our rates because to reflect those cuts, because it's like, what are we going to do? We can't. I can't sleep at night knowing that we charge somebody more than what their field man. We're here to help. We're not here to get rich.
Right.
We're in it for the long haul. But so this event came about. The MLS's back event came about, Jack, because of everything had stopped. It
This
was like, well,
very
how do we
reason.
how do we get going again?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and similar to what especially the pitchers would face in Major League Baseball, or professional baseball, to get their arms stretched out again and really get their pitch counts up. I mean, for a soccer player to get fit to be able to run 6+ miles a game again, like, it doesn't just happen overnight. So things started getting ramped back up, and we started having discussions about a potential single site bubble
Right.
tournament sometime in late May, I guess it was.
Now
Uh,
this is 26 teams in the MLS, and
correct,
it was
correct. Yep,
everybody.
yep, everybody. So when it first got pitched to me that, hey, we're going to have 26 teams in one place, and we're gonna play 50 to 60 games, 50 to 60 matches, and my head was just spinning. Like, hold on, what we're gonna do? What?
Yeah, because let's say, I mean, different than the other bubbles, different than the NBA and the NHL, we play on a living, breathing
Yes.
field.
That could only take a certain amount of events. Remember, right?
Well, yeah,
There's
well,
limitations here.
yeah, as they say, but
So I've been told. So I've been
so we've
told.
been told. But yeah,
So I was kind of given the breakdown of the schedule and all this and that, and kind of, what do you think? And it's one of those situations in life. I've been in this situation previously in my professional career, that when you're not given, essentially the answer couldn't be no.
mm-hmm,
And when the answer can't be no, then the answer, human intuition kicks in. We talked about creativity before.
mm-hmm,
Like, okay, well, if we're going to do this, we better figure out a way to do it and do it right. But my fallback has never been, differently to many, I realized that, well, how many times we're going to have to replace this field? It's, let's see how far we can push this grass. Let's just see. And everything we do from a grass can take more standpoint, talking about that puzzle. If we can get all the moving parts right and the 5 pieces of that puzzle, if we can utilize technology from surface testing, from traffic tracing, from traffic pattern mapping, like how far can we take this? So ultimately, in early June, it came together that the site for this event was going to be ESPN Wide World of Sports, which is a Disney park. A lot of people have been to, because it's absolutely a magnificent facility for youth sports. It's not a professional sports facility, but it's a magnificent youth sports facility.
Well, it's kind of something that's similar to what you have a long background in.
Correct. Yeah. I had, and in my career, my previous real job as a field manager was, I ran a facility called Maryland Soccerplex, which we had 24 field facility. We were responsible for about 160 acres in total when it comes to turf and grounds and landscapes and parking lots. And so it's a pretty sizable facility, which is one of the most high traffic facilities in the country outside of Disney's Wide World of Sports.
Okay, because both places host weekend tournaments.
Correct.
all year.
Yep. Pretty much. Soccerplex, they have dead period from about after Thanksgiving until early March, just because the weather. People want to go to Florida. They don't want to come to Washington D.C. and play in the cold. But and that some fields, some fields are open, but not a full-fledged tournament is going to be hosted.
Sure.
Yeah. Now I think sports is changing now too. That I think we're going to see. I think we're going to see year-round. As scary as that sounds, I think we're going to see year-round play on a lot of grass fields upcoming. Which is, hey, we either meet the demand or they put in a plastic field. Which one is it going to be?
There you go. So it's back to this. It's back to what you did there in June or in July. That you said to yourself, well, the answer is not going to be no. So
Yep.
what? So
they're going to do this.
Yeah,
so
we're going to do this. So let's figure it out. So when did you start down there?
I got hooked up with the field manager down there, a guy called Tim Flowers, magnificent individual. He'd been there. He'd been a part of Disney parks for most of his entire career, and he recently is retiring, which is just incredible to think that he got to go out on this. He may have said enough of this. I've got to talk to him in person. We just exchanged some notes, but I'm excited for him because he's seen a lot of things, and his team of folks. I mean, they're not any stranger to events. They used to have spring training for the Braves, while also running youth tournaments on their other. They have 30 fields total. One of those being the Braves spring. Some of those being Braves spring training fields. Some of those, one of those being the Braves spring training stadium until I guess last year was the first year they didn't have spring training. So they weren't strangers to a lot of stuff at one time, which thank goodness they had a little experience in this. I'd had a little experience with a lot of fields and big events. So we all kind of had a little of experience, but never before had 26 professional teams been put in one place for training camp for 3 weeks and then to play. Essentially, we played 51 matches in 35 days on just 3 fields.
On only 3.
On 3 fields.
Now you also had 17 fields total that were introduced to the MLS. But I mean, I imagine those teams were having practices throughout the entire 6-week event.
Always. Now, during the first few weeks, each team essentially you had 2 trainings, doing 2 days to get back fit again. Mm-hmm. So, we had a lot of days that, our entire time period from from 7 in the morning until noon, and then from 5 p.m. until at least 11 p.m. was training sessions. And you'd have one team on, and then the next team would come on right after them, and they get their training in, because they were training on 14, these 26 teams across 14 fields.
Okay.
So it was, we were doing, you just kind of take every day as it comes at you, because it was, we only had about 10 days to prepare before the first team arrived.
Mm-hmm.
Now, because of the pandemic, and I think it's pretty public that Disney had furloughed a lot of people, and Disney cast members are all, whether they work at ESPN Wide World of Sports, or if they work at the Magic Kingdom or whatever it would be, they're all part of the same union.
Okay.
And the union does a nice job of trying to protect. Hey, let's not, we need to bring people back by seniority. We need to do this, do that. They really do a nice job to protect their folks. But at the same time, it's like the challenge that we were facing, they had to bring all their people back, had to get their equipment ready. They had to bring in more equipment because we didn't have enough equipment.
Mm-hmm.
We had to, the things we had to prepare for, we had a couple weeks.
Wow.
But it's not like you can go down to, and that's the thing, that facility, it's a thing that decision makers, and golf people realize this too, especially with Greens Committee, and like even general managers of facilities, they don't completely comprehend. You can't just call and get something and get it there tomorrow.
No.
It's not a.
Everything in turf is easier said than done.
Correct. And that to me is another huge need, from an education standpoint. It's just, but that's why it's important that field managers or turf managers in general are participating in meetings, that they don't say, oh, well, I don't need to be in this meeting today because they're not talking about anything that's important. Well, you need to be in that meeting because, one, you need to know, they need to know to respect you, but two, they need to know that, if one point comes up and you say, well, if we're going to buy a new mower, it's going to take 2 months to get it.
Mm-hmm.
People need to know those kinds of things. And when we don't engage ourselves in the conversations, no one's ever going to learn. Now, it's a challenging piece that we have to continue to work on, but so we had to get everything together, and Tim and his team, John Turnbull and Tommy Evans are his assistants.
Okay.
And they just have a magnificent crew of seasoned veteran folks that they weren't afraid to work.
So you have the asset of a very well-run crew with really experienced guys.
Extremely, yeah. And it's that was a big
ready to
deal
work. These guys were ready to work too.
Yeah, and they'd been furloughed for several months, and the disaster of what Florida's unemployment system had been as well. Most of them hadn't received any unemployment reimbursement at that point either. So hey, give me some overtime too. I mean, they were just glad to be away from home. Frankly,
this is such a 2020 story, man. This is like gosh. Everything here is a story that could only have happened last year.
Yep.
And it all came to head here for this event.
And it's so they just, Jack, I've never seen a group of people just say, you know what, this is going to be fun. But I was like that. Tim was like that. The team was like that. It was like, holy cow, we're going to do this and it's going to be fun.
Okay.
Now, there were a lot of days that I'm sure they would look at me, and the things we were asking for were not fun. And the expectations we had were just so incredibly high, because that's what the expectations of a professional athlete. They don't care that there's been a team training on that pitch 3 other times that day. They're there to do their job. They're there to focus on getting better, getting fit, to be able to earn their paycheck, to be able to prolong their career.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? Win games. There were coaches that lost their job because they didn't perform well during this tournament. Like, if we can't take a step back, and I know when field managers, and I'm ranting again, but field managers so many times will, if coach would just listen. Do you know anybody that's lost their job as a sports field manager because they didn't do their job correctly? I don't know any currently, because it doesn't happen.
Yeah, it just doesn't happen.
Now in golf, I think it does happen. But in sports, we always have an excuse. Well, it was the weather, it was this, it's that. It's our job to do our job.
Right. And these guys, yeah, and
These
these
guys are
players
going
and coaches were there to do their job,
to
and
do their job.
you
And
had to fill in your piece.
they can't do their job if we don't do our job. That's exactly right. It's so important. So it was, yeah. So really, and then so the matches started. The matches started on July 8th. We had 3 match fields that we were having these matches on. So we had about, what do we have, 20 days to prepare the match fields. So we had a little extra time, 20 days to prepare the match fields. So, we had to get mowing heights down, get them thinned out, get them tightened up.
Well, let's talk some specifics about like how were the fields, and how were the fields when the tournament started?
Thick, real thick.
Okay.
Real thick. A lot of Florida rain.
Succulent, kind of thick and succulent.
Yeah. A lot of Florida
which
rain.
is a dangerous thing when you're about to get a lot of wear.
Not gonna take about 1 match worth of traffic, and then it would be bare.
Okay.
They were tall because they had been mowing a minimum amount because their staff had been furloughed.
Exactly.
Yep. And what happens in Florida in June? It rains a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens when it rains a lot and the soil temperature comes up? Well, organic matter releases.
Mm-hmm.
And
juicy, thick, succulent. And this is latitude 36 you were growing?
Most fields were latitude 36. Few fields of 419.
Mm-hmm.
A few fields that were a mix of latitude and 419 that they'd replaced middles of 419 with latitude. And a mix of infrastructure from drainage. Some fields had drainage, some fields didn't have drainage. So it was a little bit of mix and match of a lot of things.
So what does the team do specifically in those maybe, you said 21 days about before at least the match play started? What do you do to get these fields to the point where they can start taking some abuse?
Batter them. Absolutely batter them. We battered them. It's and I've said this, and Tim knows, and if we had 28 days, we had 1 more week, we would have phrase mowed the whole place.
Wow.
And because they were too thick, like they were just so thick and so lush, there was no strength to it at all, because they hadn't been able to do the things that they wanted to do, that they needed to do to keep the grass strong, But in fairness, they didn't know when their next event was going to be.
Right.
And in fairness, it's Bermuda. We can get it tightened back up real quick.
Right. But on the other side of that is that Bermuda can get wily pretty quick. Especially in Florida in the summertime, as you're saying. So
it's it's one of my favorite tools, Jack, and this is one of the reasons I say we can make this field maintenance so simple. The impact of a spring tine harrow, the impact of a brush, like a pull behind.
Mm-hmm.
They had a couple of greens groomers with spring tines on the front, a brush on the back.
Mm-hmm.
You can build it. You can go to Lowe's and buy a spring tine harrow for $300 to clean out debris, surface debris from fields that are growing like that. We started brushing them in springtime, and you'd sweep them, and it would the piles in the parking lot looked like we were phrase mowing.
There you go.
There was so much debris coming out. But guess what? We did it with what we had right on hand.
Okay.
And we kept it simple, because we weren't cutting a whole bunch of runners to essentially, we weren't cutting a bunch of stolons to make the plant bleed and essentially use carbohydrate reserves that we wanted to just redirect to the roots. Mm-hmm. or obviously the roots are so important, but they didn't, at that point, the grass didn't have the roots that it needed because they hadn't been able to focus on it. Mm-hmm. It had been spring. It had greened up. What happens in the spring? It greens up. It uses carbohydrate reserves to green up and start to grow.
Yeah, and then if you're not right behind that,
Sure.
doing everything you need to do, then it starts to take a nosedive in the
That's
summertime.
exactly right. Yeah. So, get the growth regulator out, starting to get the mowing heights down. I mean, I think the biggest part of all of it, because even I think, even the team, the Disney team kind of started looking at me like, are you sure this is going to work? Because they looked bad. After about the first week, when we got done with them, they looked terrible. Now, to me, they looked fantastic because they were finally tight. They were finally tight. Like the height was down.
Sand was coming in behind all this too.
Yeah.
Okay,
Stuck in sand
so we
and-
said battered, and you did anything at your disposal.
Correct. Yeah, we Renovate Plus with the Eco Light, really,
cool.
with a Zeolite, really important for
Yeah.
for high traffic fields, especially in the middle. We dry ejected profile through the high traffic areas on the match fields to get to open up, get some porosity, retained porosity, pore space that's not going to compact from high traffic. Get those, get it in, get that opened up, keep that water moving down through that any organic layer that might exist. Like we were doing it all. We were doing it all, man. We were just.
Now I mean, this is something we could touch on again, but you pointed out, and you've said it a couple times, you isolate those areas of the field that really see the most use.
So through our previous work as a firm over the first 5 years, and we had just turned 5 in May, before we started this in June. So through those 5 years, the core of our business is data collection.
Okay.
When we collect data, we GPS map everything.
You're really you're as much an accountant as you are
in a way. Yeah. That's I take that as a compliment. Thank you. Because we do. We want to diagnose and understand everything that's happening. Yes.
Okay.
So we had a lot of theories, and they weren't just theories because they were in practice. Even people like Alan Reed at FC Dallas, I mean, he does these things on a daily basis, from a testing and GPS mapping, and Mitch at Maryland Soccerplex have been doing the same things, and there's several other professional teams that do this as well. Like,
what are they mapping?
Well, what we map specifically is we use a device that's called the Advanced Artificial Athlete. So essentially, I am a opponent. I'm against the use of GMAX because it doesn't give us an actual. It doesn't tell us enough, and it also doesn't tell us the same thing every time. Like, we use it a lot. We've studied a lot. We work with one of the top testing businesses that builds testing equipment in the world in Holland called Deltec Equipment. They've been producing testing equipment for sports surfaces for many years. The Advanced Artificial Athlete is a required tool for the assessment of synthetic fields. It's a required tool for the assessment of things like running tracks and gym floors, to kind of understand the impact of an actual, what's the experience of an athlete on a surface. So we use that device to tell us how much energy goes into the surface, which could indicate surface compaction as well, like if the energy is getting in. How much energy rebounds out of a surface. So if the energy goes in and then comes back into the legs, like, that can also be used as a measure of hard pan.
Okay.
Because if energy is not going to come out of a soil if it is not compact, like it's a natural absorber of energy.
It can accept it.
Just like moisture,
Right.
water. Soil's going to accept water if there's pore space there to accept it. Energy is the same thing. If there's pore space there to accept it, it's going to accept it. And then the third thing, and probably the most important thing from an athlete perspective, is we map and we measure a thing called vertical deformation. So when the foot makes impact with the surface, how much does that surface give? And we can measure that in millimeters, and we can measure that in tenths of millimeters.
Okay.
So a surface that gives, what we see with soccer athletes, especially a surface that gives around 5 to 7 millimeters. So, being that 24 millimeters essentially is an inch, 25 millimeters is an inch, 12 and a half would be a half inch. So somewhere between, quarter of an inch.
Quarter inch.
If a surface is giving 12 to 14 millimeters, so a half inch,
Right. That's
athletes are going to start complaining about the surface being too spongy or too soft.
too soft. So they know that what they're really looking for is this quarter of an inch sort of give.
Well, and all they know is it feels firm underfoot. So
Right.
they want a surface that's firm, but not hard. So there's a combination there. If you have compaction, you can have a completely compact surface, rock hard, that gives a lot.
Yeah, that could.
So let's say it has a thatch layer, organic layer on top, but then it's rock hard underneath. Well, you can also have a field that's firm on top.
Mm-hmm.
So not a lot of thatch, been top dressed, been cleaned out, nice and firm. Cleats dig, cleat in, cleat out. Cleats make contact with those stolons even on that Bermuda grass. But it can be firm, but then it can be soft because there's no compaction in the soil. So the energy can be absorbed.
Or because there's no roots and it's just a sand bucket.
Yeah, you can do that too. Yeah. Well, actually, the more roots we see on a field, the more energy absorption we see, because those roots are opening up pore space around them because they're growing.
Mm-hmm.
They're also there's a little bit of elasticity in a soil that's got roots in it, because what are those roots? Those roots are living kind of elastic type things.
Mm-hmm.
They absorb energy.
Yeah.
And it's incredible from a data standpoint, what we can assess and understand quickly. All of this sounds overwhelming. This is really easy to quantify.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and it becomes as natural as the TDR has become for measuring soil moisture.
Exactly.
It becomes just a normal part of your perspective of the field.
And then, and in combination with what we collect from the artificial athlete, we map soil moisture as well. We use Pogo and because it has a nice, they've got a good mapping technology and the ability to use one device compared to another device. Really. So we have the combination of data here that we've talked about. So we understand, all of a sudden, we're able to make decisions on how much water or when do we need to water, where do we need to water, because we're mapping it. Same thing for soil compaction. Like we know where a field's compact, where a field's not compact. Generally, especially a field that hasn't been maintained, differently. Let's not say correctly, but if you haven't maintained your field differently to come along with these things, the middle's going to be compact. So when we started at Disney, we had middles of fields that were compact. We had corners of the field that were holding a lot of moisture, that had a vertical deformation, a thatch level that was almost double what was in the center of the pitch.
Wow.
Because guess what? All the play's in the middle. They don't go play in the corner.
Yes.
So that grass has never been thinned out. We got a natural verticutter and cleats running up and down that surface, when they're playing football or soccer. So taking all that data into account, we've been seeing this kind of traffic pattern form for 5 years. So that's why this long explanation takes us to where we trajectory your profile into the area we knew, or at least in theory, was going to be high traffic. We did Renovate Plus at really, extra high rates in those high traffic areas.
Right.
We were using a different amount of nitrogen fertilizer. So, we use slow release pretty much on everything. We were making foliar applications different. By the end of the event, we were spraying Primo differently. We had 3 zones of the field by the end of the event that we were spraying Primo differently on all 3 different zones.
Wow.
So
Now, how did you do at bringing those two extremes to somewhat of a consistency, the corners of the field, the center of the field in your data collection?
well, ultimately, when we start getting those physical things correct, um, things start to react a lot more evenly.
Mm-hmm.
What we don't realize is that if we're not doing, like, the middle of a field that's more compact is never going to respond the same way the corner is going to respond until we get the physical conditions, the compaction conditions, the moisture. If we don't get things even, they're not going to grow evenly.
Absolutely.
But the middle needs to grow more than the corner because it's getting more play. So,
Right.
we got to flip it all the way upside down in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So we took it to a whole nother level, Jack, is really what, when we got things dialed in, we were pretty happy with them. It didn't look great on the match pitches as we started. The training fields didn't look great at all.
Okay.
But I mean, from a training pitch standpoint, our training pitches were in better condition, especially because we battered them so much. They were in better condition at the end of the event than they were at the beginning of the event.
Unbelievable.
And that's just because, it's you give them what they need where they need them,
You were
and just keep it simple.
you were building a program that was reactive to the data that you were getting.
Correct. Jack, we were on offense.
Mm-hmm.
Our goal, if we were going to bring these fields through, especially the match pitches, and that's the way I describe it, and that's the way I describe to, the way we work with our clients today is we want to get away from being on defense, we're reacting all the time. Oh, well, we're starting to see some wear. What if we live in a world that we don't start to see wear because we're actually ahead of that wear? Like,
Yeah.
that's where we want to be.
That's making a roadmap. That's using the data for the future, not the data for the
Correct.
past.
Yeah, we're going to decide how the field's going to wear because
Mhm.
we so all that said, though, these match pitches, what we were looking at was in the first 16 days in the opening round of the tournament, we were going to play 8 matches on one pitch. That pitch was set up. They were essentially turned into television studios. Green screens put up, and
Unbelievable.
$10 million worth of. I think I heard the number $10 million worth of TV production and setup that went into this. And we're talking about the field maintenance, the operations side. There's a whole nother story.
Right,
How these
right.
people, incredible,
Because
incredible.
they were flipping games. They were,
Correct. Well,
so
they essentially took youth fields or decent level youth fields and turned them into the most technologically advanced television studios, 2 acres worth,
2 acres worth of a television
that
studio.
had never had that before. So generators, and we had Skycam on all three match fields,
Wow. So they
and you
had
don't have anything to hook to.
towers. Yeah.
You don't have anything to hook to, so that we had every available high lift,
Yeah.
120, 150-foot high lift available in Florida, or in the Southeast. But the flip side of that is that, so every time it rains, or every time there's a thunderstorm, which is essentially every day,
Yes.
those high lifts have to come down. That camera has to come down. That's a 2-hour build for them up and down. Well, guess where that comes down? It comes down right in the middle of the pitch.
Oh my
The
gosh.
most high traffic spot on the entire event for all 3 fields was right in the middle where the Skycam got set
Oh
up
my
every day.
gosh. That's insane.
Like the things field boards, LED field boards in place for 40 days that
Oh,
typically would go in and come out or sit on a concrete apron in a stadium.
right.
Now they were sitting on the grass and they were just there. So how do
Um,
we weed eat against an LED field board and not destroy the lighting the lighting pieces in them? So they're going
wow.
around hand spraying Primo against the
I was
bottom of
gonna say
the
that's
bottom
like
of
a growth regulator job right there.
nothing. So
Wow.
like all of those things, were super unique. But so one of these pitches was set up for 8 or for morning matches. ESPN essentially, they had this football for breakfast, if you will. There's a 9 a.m. match on one of these fields. I think it was 8 of the 16 days in the opening round. So we had that one pitch. So eight games in 16 days. Really, we can handle that. So then there were 2 other pitches that were set up for the night matches. And every night we had an 8 p.m. match and we had a 10:30 p.m. match.
Wow.
On the same pitch each night. And then between the 2, we'd rotate from one pitch to the other every other night. Essentially is how, unless it was a special night and then they wanted it on, one specific place.
Yeah.
So in turn, one of the 2 got 15 matches in 16 days. The other one got 14 and 16. The other one got 13 and 15.
Okay. It's a lot.
That's a lot. So the typical MLS stadium would host, regular season matches, is going to host 17 matches regular season in a year, or in a 9-month season.
Right.
We were essentially going to do a 9-month season in 16 days.
Wow.
While at the same time, you had 14 other fields that were getting training sessions by the other. Well, you were playing. You had 6 teams playing a day, so there were 20 other teams that needed to train every day. So you still had more fields or more teams than you had fields. So you still had fields that were getting multiple training sessions every single day.
Jeez.
The moving parts alone were like,
yeah,
you just roll with it, baby. You don't know any better.
So, so what did you learn? What did everyone learn from this?
Well, we learned a lot.
Right.
And none of it, and to the point, right now, if somebody's watching this and say, well, I don't believe that they were able to keep them in good condition, every single match was either on Fox or ESPN. So you can go back and you can watch every single one of them right now.
There you go.
At that point, the Women's Professional League and WSL had started. The NBA hadn't started. Major League Baseball hadn't started. We had the women's soccer going on, and then we had the men's soccer going on, and that was it on July 8th. It was on. It was on, baby, and it was. Jack, it was the coolest thing I've ever been a part of.
It's excellent
to be away from Ida. She was 4 months old at that point.
Yeah.
And I cry about this every time I try to talk about it, because it's just, let's think about where we were at in July.
It was scary times still.
Terrifying. Like, we've just kind of become used to the fact of, hey, what are we at? 440,000 people have died now. At that point, we were going through the summer spike. Florida was going through the summer spike.
Yeah. And there was no announcement about any vaccines or anything.
None.
We were all terrified.
Terrified. To be away from my daughter and my wife for 2 months, to be in far away from home, but guess what we did? MLS came back, and it's so cool. People needed sport more than ever at that point. Absolutely. And it can be argued, well, it's not time to be playing sports. Well, don't doctors and nurses and people lying in hospital beds, don't they need entertainment? Like, people love sports.
100%.
To be able to provide and see all the videos of people at home cheering for their teams, and families finally had something to be excited about. God, it was cool.
Yeah, it's way cool.
The one thing,
that's the other thing, like you said, we gotta stop and smell the roses about how important it is to do what we do as an industry. We're important to the greater community.
And that's man, it was great to be able to be a part of bringing some joy. And that's right, Jack. It's important, because so many times we think, and we talked about it, we're in the turf industry. No, we're not. We're in the entertainment business. And whether people, and that's one thing where I really get fired up and get on my high horse about, we don't grow grass for a living. We grow grass for athletes to do their job, and we grow grass for entertainment. If people don't pay for tickets and watch television, then guess what? We don't get paid. Our teams that we work for don't get paid. The athletes don't get paid. Like that's the other piece of this, that there's just so much. There's so much just. I'm not going to pick a word because it will be come across
want to
too
offend.
strong.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people in sports turf that are not backing up the athletes from social and cultural issues that are happening right now. We are making money and we are doing our jobs on the back of over 70% minority athletes.
Wow.
Yet there are 2 non-white sports field managers, like head sports field managers in professional sports. That's absolutely unacceptable. Like there's two women, I believe. That's unacceptable.
Yeah, it doesn't fit the demographics.
But let's get off of let's get out of our own way and start to realize we're in the entertainment business, and we're in the entertainment business thanks to these athletes.
Mm-hmm.
And what a great way to make a living. What a great way. Oh my goodness. It's just.
Yeah. So let's wrap everyone into it. Let's totally inclusive. Let's
Absolutely.
talk about how important it is to do what we do.
Exactly right.
Let's bring great turf fields, great natural grass fields to the communities all around the country.
And we can, and those lessons that we learned from this event, the lessons we learned from data every single day, man, grass can take more. Like but and on this, I mean, we were collecting surface data twice a day. So we were testing a pitch before the match and after the match, because we needed to know how it changed physically from a compaction, moisture. We were able to start every single match at a soil moisture within 3.5% average. Like we figured out the soil moisture we need. Now, thank goodness that soil moisture was pretty high.
Okay.
because Mother Nature, if we needed it dry, Mother Nature said, no.
Right. It wasn't going to happen.
Have 2 inches of rain at 3:00 and then play your match at 8:00 and see what you think.
Yeah.
Thank goodness moisture was good in these conditions, but that's sand-based fields.
Right. You had and at least the match fields had some internal drainage and all.
Exactly. And it's
but you were able to maintain that sweet spot because of data. Because of dialing it in.
We were not guessing.
Right.
So I referenced Paul D. Podesta and Peter Drucker earlier.
Mm-hmm.
If you studied Nick Saban and what he does now, and especially a lot of these college coaches talk about the process. Chris Beard, who is the basketball coach at Texas Tech, there's a video if you're curious. If it's he went on a great rant in December of 19, something like December 5th or something. They'd been the Final Four the year before. The team wasn't started off as good as they wanted to that year, and a reporter asked him about, how you gonna overcome this sluggish start, and he went on a 2.5-minute explanation about the process. And it's simple things like we have to win today. We have to worry about tomorrow. We win today. Mm-hmm. We focus on going to class. We focus on sitting in front of the room. We focus on our diet. Focus on working hard. Things we can control.
Mm-hmm.
So I say that because I had one person in my life at that point that their job every single day, 3 times a day, was to simply text me, "Trust the process."
There you go, man.
Because we took all intuition out. Because by intuition, we were going to have to replace 15 matches in 16 days. It's a full season. We're going to have to replace the entire field halfway through that by conventional wisdom. Man, I tell you, there were a lot of days it's like, this isn't the right thing to be doing by intuition. But by data, well, no, the numbers, what the numbers say we need,
and
what I think I need are different. Well, I didn't know. I've never known what we actually need because we never had the numbers. Because never before had we collected this much data, this much information. We also had, there's an AI sensor called Intelligent Play that maps the traffic pattern. Like you can pull up a traffic pattern report from the last 30 minutes on a field, from the last 6 days, from, from a match, whatever it is. So we knew by a heat map where all the traffic was from the mowers, from the tractors, from the sprayers, from the people.
So it confirmed. So it should have confirmed what you were seeing with the
physically.
with the physical tests.
Correct. That's
Okay.
exactly right. Yep.
And it did.
It absolutely did. It absolutely, most of the time they absolutely agreed.
Okay.
So it was like, okay, we need to, this data point says this, and this data. Biggest thing, Jack, is water. It's such a simple thing. It's like, oh, we definitely have to water tonight. No, we don't need to. Or yes, we should. Or other thing, tracking EC in soil to say what's our EC and salt are connected to available nitrogen. Is it time to feed? Is it not time to feed? Man, we fed last night, and look how much that nitrogen. Let's see how that salt.
Yeah, let's see how high that EC is. Yeah, yeah. So the EC.
There were a few times that we were feeding, especially thin areas, that we would go out with a mix of the thinnest spot on the field, from the goal mouth up to the top, across the PK spot, up to the top of the 18-yard box.
Okay.
A goalie, a professional goalie, is laser focused. He is guiding the defense. He is guiding the defense on that entire club, on that all those defenders. He's telling them where to go. He's kind of the captain of the backside.
So he's doing that in that area.
He's walking straight up to the top of the 18, talking to those guys, letting them know, giving them feedback on what's happening down the pitch. Like that would turn that and the two referee lines, because repetitive. And the thing that hurts, or the way that thins out the fastest, is to have a plant that's too lush, because all it is
fat,
just
juicy plant. To have a fat, juicy plant in that area.
So we were trying to feed it to get it to recover, but then not feed it too much. Offset it with potassium silicate. And
well, I haven't talked about it at all, but that's where biological soil management comes in.
Absolutely.
Because that's the way that the plant can grow and recover without being fat and juicy.
Right. Yep. Yeah. And that's, every bit of, from amino acids to focus, from a foliar and rooting standpoint, but also to the physical properties in the soil.
Yeah, oxygen,
baby.
Yeah.
How simple is that?
Right.
How simple is that?
Right.
And that, we just focused. Ultimately, all this is just shiny, cool stuff. But we focused on the areas that need it, and we didn't focus on the areas that didn't need it. By the end, we had gotten confident enough to know that from the center circle and outside the center circle and outside the 6-yard box on the far side of the pitch, we weren't really doing anything, because we needed to verticut so bad over there, but we couldn't verticut because we didn't have more than a day between matches. So we couldn't go in and scar it up a bunch. So the amount of debris, we were brushing and trying to take out debris, and we were push mowing with walk behind 21-inch push mowers sucking up debris.
Vacuums. Yeah.
Because we needed to clean it out so badly. But one thing I just cautioned, just try to, I said, we couldn't verticut. Can't isn't a solution.
Right.
That was another big thing that was on my whiteboard of during this event. Can't isn't a solution. I don't care if we can't. What I care about is what we can. If we know we have a problem, then we have to figure out a different way to solve it.
So you can't verticut, but maybe you can tickle it a little bit.
That's right.
Brush.
Right.
You can do.
Right. Give it a little brush.
Right.
Do what you can do. That's right. Find a way. And it's That's why I said, thank goodness the team from Disney was just, God, they were phenomenal. Like some of the things that I would say, hey, let's we're going to try this today. And they look at you like, well, you're not from the same planet I'm from, but okay, if you want us to do that, we'll do that. And yeah,
I mean, I think what you do is so important, and it is a step back, because it was, I think too many times someone would come up with the fact that, well, I can't do this, and like the field in this area, I can't maintain it enough to keep that field center alive and to keep these high pressure areas alive. And since I can't, or I can't afford to, or I don't have enough time to treat the whole field, then I can't do anything. Well, you threw that notion right away, and you say, and I feel as though it was some of that sensibility that you came to it with, from the fact that in agriculture and farming agriculture, you have to think about the overhead. You have to think about the end goals, like the end, what you're trying to get out of it, and only put into it what you can get out of it.
Right.
So,
well, and another big piece of what you're saying, and I got this from, and I've gotten this from, Paul D. Podesta again, when he does a lot of talks and things, he talks about the importance of, of trusting data and technology, especially, is there's a whole big piece of humility to step back and say, okay, what I've always done, the way I've always done it, I'm going to do it differently than that. That doesn't, like we were talking about before, like it's not an indictment of the past.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we have more information now. Like we have to be humble. Like we're not saying there's something wrong with you or me or anybody else in the way they maintain their field. It's just that we have all these ideas about what we can and what we can't do, and we let those, especially can't, negativity can drive our mind and take control of our mind. Doesn't mean we're negative people, doesn't mean we're bad people. It just means that we need to get a little more creative, and it's
right, and don't
find a new solution.
Don't fall down that slippery slope that is throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Right, that's right.
Like, just don't. It's a slippery slope. Don't go near it. So let's think of a solution.
And it's harder said than done. I mean, one thing I think is a big problem or a big challenge that field managers and turf managers face is that this idea of fungicide, like paint it white, sleep at night. Well, I'm sorry, but I don't live in that world. I don't live. You're not going to come and sell me something because I'm living in a world of fear.
Mm-hmm.
But what does every salesperson sell? They sell something that that they're selling based on fear that our grass might die. Well, all we're talking about is changing our mindset and going on offense instead of being on defense. So it's a whole big cycle, because you start to be positive, but yet, somebody else is, I'm seeing this problem. You seeing this problem? Well, no, I'm not seeing that problem. Oh crap. Maybe I'm going to start seeing that problem.
Right. Well, let me do something now.
Yeah. My water's right. My fertility's right. My compaction's right. I got the best grass I can. You're not going to have a problem.
There you go. There you go.
Trust it. And when climate conditions are correct, then we use we're on offense here. That's where we're going with all these disease models and everything. A disease model says that problem is with disease models is they don't take into account that you have excess organic matter. So your nitrogen release is triple than what the disease model can take into account. It's not taking into account that you don't have any drainage in your top 3 inches because you have so much compaction. Like, it's not, a disease model doesn't take into account all those things.
Right.
Which is a challenge.
So you need to, as the manager.
So you need to. That's where we are more valuable as managers, and we even give ourselves credit. It's okay to use data. and technology to help us make the decisions, because if we are making those decisions correctly, then we become that much more important.
Yeah,
And
yeah, and
frankly, we save money and we
yeah, we
make better
save money.
surfaces.
We're on offense, like you're saying.
Offense. That's exactly right. So it's
Well, Jared, this was fun, man.
yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. It's I think that's the the takeaways, as you said, on offense, like endless possibilities, endless possibilities, and it's especially when it comes to field surfaces, because they are not failing because of too much play. They're failing because our management hasn't evolved, and our management hasn't evolved because we didn't have the tools and the understanding to be able to evolve it.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're starting to learn, and we're just we're scratching the surface on this. So
Yes.
there's so much to come. So
And
much to come.
this is accessible to everybody. This
It is.
isn't something that is elitist either. This
No,
this isn't just for the professional sports fields. This is
that's
accessible to everyone.
that's a great point. I'm glad you made it, because somebody said that to me the other day. It's like, oh, I really wish we could afford all this fancy testing equipment, or this, to afford for, for our firm to, it's what our firm does. We diagnose problems and help create solutions. Like, the flip side of that is, can you afford not to?
Mm-hmm.
Because if your field is failing, your option is $1 million plastic synthetic system. It's like, it's when people say, well, grass fields are always rained out. Okay, well, so you need synthetic turf, you think, because so it won't be rained out. I said, well, a synthetic field has drainage. That's why it's not rained out.
Mm-hmm.
What if you put drainage in a grass field?
Yeah, how's that? And then you could still be on the grass surface.
Like, wait a minute. Like, there are, a minimal maintained natural grass field. If it's one, and a $1 million synthetic system is 100, there's 99 options between.
There you go.
It's that understanding is just, it's so important, because the ability to manipulate, the ability to improve, like, you can't afford not to focus on data and improvement, because the flip side is something that we would, again, like I said, this is not grass versus synthetic. That's not, none of the work that we do is that. And now we get pulled into synthetic situations of people think they need a synthetic field, and hey, help us out. Well, why are you to that point? What's wrong with your grass field, and how do we make it better?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, as an industry, Jack, it's so exciting. Like, I through this, I throw stones all the time. I throw stones at universities and professional organizations, and because they want to tell me how things really are or should be. And all my response to that is, but look at the potential opportunities for students in turf programs, for green jobs, for
employment, for employment.
endless.
And I mean, we haven't talked about it a lot, but you did bring it up. It is a climate change mitigation tool. It's a carbon sink. It's a carbon capture system.
Yep. Endless positives about what we do. Endless positives.
That's right. You're exactly right. Well, thank you.
And what's good for the environment and good for the field is good for the athlete. So we could also take this a whole nother route to talk about the public health epidemic that knee injuries and lower leg injuries are for athletes on bad fields.
It's no question anymore. There was a time maybe 10 years ago where there was still a question as to whether athletes wanted to play on artificial turf or on natural turf. We know athletes want to play on natural turf.
Yeah.
So
good natural turf.
That's right. That's right. Very good point.
Jack, thanks.
You got it. Thank you, Jared.
We could go for a while, so I appreciate everybody for listening for this. I hope if someone can take just one small thing away from this, then we've helped.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Rome wasn't built in a day.
That's right.
That's step at a time.
And we are fortunate that we have a great time doing it. So,
Amen, brother. Amen to that.
all right. Well, thank you so much.
You bet. Enjoy the day.
All right, you too, Jared. See ya.